The moment the news broke that Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife were in U.S. custody, the world collectively paused. Imagine the shock of seeing the leader of a nation, someone who has been at the center of international attention for years, suddenly in a situation that feels unprecedented. The headlines alone carry weight: a president, a partner, accountability, and a nation watching closely. For millions, this is more than political drama. It is a profound moment that shakes assumptions about power, responsibility, and consequence. In those first few seconds of reading the news, a question naturally rises in everyone's mind. How did it come to this, and what happens next? That immediate curiosity is the very force that keeps eyes glued to the story, hearts racing with anticipation, and minds actively trying to understand a world that suddenly feels unpredictable. To truly grasp the depth of this moment, we need to reflect on what it means for Venezuela, the United States, and the global community. Maduro has been a figure of immense controversy, a symbol of leadership in challenging times, and a lightning rod for debate. For citizens inside Venezuela, this news ignites a range of emotions, from hope that change is possible, to fear of instability and uncertainty. The psychological weight of seeing a figure who has long represented control suddenly detained resonates deeply, not just as politics, but as human drama. People instinctively connect stories of leadership and consequence to their own experiences, wondering how power, trust, and accountability operate in their own lives. This is why moments like these capture attention so completely. They speak to both the global stage and the personal stage simultaneously. Across international borders, the implications extend far beyond one country. The United States' involvement signals a shift in approach, a willingness to assert influence, and a clear message about accountability on a global scale. For analysts, diplomats, and observers, the questions multiply. What led to this decision? What does it mean for bilateral relations? And how will neighboring nations respond? For ordinary viewers, this creates a compelling narrative arc, a story of cause and effect, of strategy and consequence, of individuals navigating complex systems of power. The mind begins to map possibilities, and in doing so, the viewer becomes an active participant in the unfolding story. The emotional pull is subtle but strong. Curiosity is met with anticipation, and anticipation is met with reflection, creating a cycle that keeps attention locked in. At the heart of this news is also a lesson in the fragility and responsibility of leadership. Leaders, no matter how powerful, operate under scrutiny, expectation, and consequence. Maduro's position as president has always been contentious, but seeing him and his spouse in custody underscores a universal truth: decisions, actions, and the weight of power carry long-term effects. The story invites viewers to consider their own choices and responsibilities. While we may not govern nations, each of us wields influence over relationships, careers, and communities. Watching the world respond to extraordinary accountability encourages reflection. How do we manage our own authority, our own ethical boundaries, and our own commitments? These subtle psychological cues are what make a story like this endlessly engaging for a global audience. The human element cannot be overstated. Beyond politics and strategy, there is vulnerability, fear, anticipation, and even hope embedded in this moment. Citizens, journalists, family members, and world leaders alike are experiencing waves of emotion. In a way, the story of Maduro and his wife becomes a mirror to the audience, showing how even those at the highest levels of power are subject to the same universal truths that govern human life. Choices have consequences, accountability matters, and nothing lasts forever. That mirror effect draws viewers in, not through sensationalism, but through empathy and reflection. It transforms passive observation into active emotional engagement. Meanwhile, media coverage amplifies these emotional and psychological threads, offering context, analysis, and speculation. Headlines spark curiosity, commentary invites reflection, and real-time updates create a sense of immediacy. For viewers, this constant flow becomes a mental exercise, predicting outcomes, imagining scenarios, and connecting dots. Retention is reinforced naturally. A mind that is actively thinking and emotionally invested does not wander, does not disengage. The unfolding narrative of Maduro's custody is not just news. It is a live demonstration of cause, effect, and consequence, unfolding in a way that makes viewers feel part of history. Even as tensions rise, the story also provides hope and motivation for personal reflection. Seeing power balanced by accountability reminds us of the importance of responsibility, integrity, and action in our own lives. The ripple effect of leadership, decisions, and consequences encourages viewers to think about how they influence their own environments, communities, and relationships. It is an invitation to consider, when faced with challenges, how do we act ethically? When entrusted with responsibility, how do we honor it? These reflective moments subtly enhance retention by creating personal relevance, ensuring that viewers are not just observing the story but internalizing its lessons in real time. As the world absorbs the implications of Nicolas Maduro and his wife being in U.S. custody, the international response begins to take shape. Governments, media outlets, and analysts across continents are examining what this means not only for Venezuela, but for regional stability, diplomacy, and future leadership norms. For neighboring countries, it is a moment of intense observation. Uncertainty mixes with opportunity, as nations consider both the ripple effects on trade, migration, and alliances, and the possibility of reshaping relations in a changing political landscape. The story, therefore, is not isolated. It radiates outward, touching countless lives and systems. For viewers, this magnifies the stakes. What might initially seem like a distant political incident is now clearly a global event with layers of influence, consequence, and reflection that ripple across borders and impact everyday life in subtle ways. Inside Venezuela, the news carries a deeply human and emotional weight. Citizens who have lived under economic challenges, political turbulence, and social unrest are experiencing a complex mix of hope, fear, and skepticism. For some, the detention of the president may symbolize a chance for change, accountability, and renewed trust in governance. For others, it raises questions about stability, the continuity of leadership, and the potential for further uncertainty. This duality resonates psychologically because it mirrors our own experiences in life. Moments of sudden change often bring both promise and anxiety. By watching these developments unfold, viewers are drawn into a narrative that is both globally significant and personally relatable, keeping engagement high because the story taps into universal human experiences of risk, consequence, and anticipation. Meanwhile, the United States' role introduces another layer of complexity and intrigue. Detaining a sitting foreign leader is not just a legal or political move. It is a message about international norms, accountability, and influence. The strategic, diplomatic, and psychological implications are immense. Observers are now reflecting on questions that extend beyond borders. How does a nation balance power and responsibility on the global stage? How does action in one country influence alliances, trade, and perception worldwide? For viewers, this creates an irresistible pull. Curiosity is naturally engaged by the unknown consequences, and the desire to understand the story fully becomes a driving force that encourages continued attention and retention. Psychologically, the narrative also highlights the fragility and universality of power. Leaders, no matter their authority or influence, are subject to consequences that remind the world of fundamental truths. Decisions matter, accountability matters, and history watches closely. This moment is a vivid example of how even the highest positions of influence do not make one immune to oversight, consequences, or global scrutiny. For viewers, this evokes a sense of reflection and even personal motivation. The story invites subtle self-examination. How do we act responsibly in our own lives? How do we manage the power and influence we hold in relationships, work, or community? This interplay between global events and personal reflection keeps the audience mentally engaged and emotionally invested, which is key for high retention. At the same time, the human element remains central. Beyond politics and diplomacy, there is vulnerability, uncertainty, and consequence. Maduro and his wife are not abstract figures. They are human beings navigating a moment that will shape both their personal lives and the perception of an entire nation. For viewers, this human dimension creates empathy, tension, and a natural curiosity to understand the circumstances, motivations, and consequences. The story becomes multi-layered. It is political drama, psychological insight, historical context, and human emotion all in one continuous narrative, making it inherently compelling. Media coverage amplifies both curiosity and understanding. News channels, online platforms, and social media provide analysis, real-time updates, and differing perspectives. This constant flow keeps the mind active. Viewers predict, question, and connect dots, naturally sustaining attention. Even subtle psychological mechanisms, like the desire for closure or the fear of missing important developments, strengthen retention. As the story unfolds, viewers feel involved, almost as if they are witnessing history in real time, which keeps them invested not only in this video but in following the wider narrative. History also provides valuable context that deepens engagement. Similar moments of political upheaval, detention, or accountability for leaders have shaped nations and influenced global relations for centuries. Drawing these parallels allows the audience to understand patterns, anticipate possible outcomes, and recognize the larger significance of current events. The story transforms from a single headline into a lens for observing leadership, responsibility, and consequence throughout human history. This reflective angle satisfies intellectual curiosity while also appealing to emotional engagement, ensuring viewers remain attentive through layered storytelling and insightful analysis. Finally, there is a subtle but powerful motivation embedded in the narrative. Watching accountability unfold at the highest levels reminds us that choices have consequences, and that even powerful individuals are accountable. For viewers, this is not just a story about leaders far away, it is a mirror that encourages self-reflection, responsibility, and thoughtful action in their own lives. It underscores the timeless human lesson that integrity, foresight, and careful decision-making matter. By intertwining global events with personal reflection, the story becomes compelling, meaningful, and emotionally resonant, naturally sustaining attention from the very first moment through to the conclusion. As the world watches, the broader political consequences of Maduro and his wife being in US custody start to crystallize. Allies and critics alike are recalculating their strategies, weighing the potential ripple effects on international relations, trade, and regional stability. Countries in Latin America are paying especially close attention, as Venezuela's position as a key regional player makes these developments impossible to ignore. For viewers, this is where the story expands beyond a single event into a larger narrative about strategy, influence, and global dynamics. It sparks curiosity. How will neighboring countries react, and what shifts might we see in alliances, partnerships, and economic decisions? This expanding context ensures that the audience remains mentally engaged, anticipating the next turn in a complex and evolving story. The economic implications are equally compelling. Venezuela has faced years of economic challenges, and leadership decisions directly impact international aid, trade agreements, and investment confidence. When a president is detained, it raises questions about continuity, stability, and governance, factors that influence not just nations but the daily lives of citizens. For viewers, the story becomes relatable. It is a reminder of how leadership and decision-making at the highest levels trickle down to affect ordinary lives. The psychological hook here is subtle yet powerful. Understanding global events empowers viewers to think critically about cause, effect, and the interconnection between leadership and daily life, keeping them engaged with each unfolding detail. From a human perspective, there is also the emotional resonance of accountability. Leaders are often seen as untouchable, their actions far removed from the consequences ordinary people face. When a figure like Maduro faces custody, it reinforces a fundamental human truth. Choices matter, actions carry consequences, and responsibility is universal. This reflection encourages viewers to internalize lessons about integrity, decision-making, and personal responsibility. By observing these dynamics at a global scale, audiences experience a combination of suspense, insight, and reflection, creating an immersive psychological environment that fosters high retention. International organizations and diplomatic channels are now entering the narrative, adding layers of complexity. Analysts speculate about the implications for future elections, human rights negotiations, and regional cooperation. Every action, statement, or silence from other governments carries weight, feeding the audience's anticipation and curiosity. Viewers are naturally drawn into predicting possible outcomes, evaluating strategies, and considering alternative scenarios. This creates a mental engagement loop. Curiosity fuels attention fuels reflection, and reflection fuels continued watching. The narrative is no longer passive. It becomes a mental exercise, a journey the viewer participates in, keeping them connected from start to finish. History, once again, provides valuable context. Political upheavals, detentions, and leadership crises have occurred across nations and centuries, each teaching lessons about strategy, resilience, and the fragile nature of power. By drawing these parallels, the story shifts from breaking news into a reflective narrative that combines insight, suspense, and education. Viewers gain a sense of understanding that goes beyond immediate headlines. They begin to see patterns, anticipate consequences, and reflect on the cyclical nature of political accountability. This historical lens not only informs but emotionally engages, ensuring that the audience remains invested throughout the unfolding story. Even within the unfolding tension, there is a subtle undercurrent of hope. The presence of accountability at the highest level offers a reminder that systems, however imperfect, have mechanisms to ensure responsibility. Citizens, both within Venezuela and globally, may draw inspiration from this, seeing that actions, even those of the most powerful, carry consequences. For viewers, this hope creates emotional balance, preventing the narrative from becoming purely anxiety-inducing while sustaining curiosity and interest. It reinforces psychological engagement by providing contrast, tension followed by reflection, uncertainty followed by hope, creating an emotional rhythm that keeps audiences watching. Finally, the narrative invites introspection on leadership, ethics, and personal responsibility. Watching global events unfold in such a tangible and high-stakes way encourages viewers to ask themselves questions about their own lives. How do I handle responsibility? What choices today will have consequences tomorrow? How do I balance power with accountability in my own sphere of influence? This subtle connection between global events and personal reflection keeps viewers emotionally and intellectually engaged, ensuring that retention remains high and the audience experiences both insight and fulfillment by the conclusion of the video.